Have you ever noticed that the moment your body is finally exhausted, your mind suddenly refuses to rest? You close your eyes, hoping for silence, but instead your thoughts grow louder. Old memories replay, mistakes resurface, conversations from years ago return as if they never ended. The future hasn't arrived yet, but it already feels heavy. You try to relax, you try to breathe, you tell yourself to clear your mind. But the harder you try, the more your thoughts fight back, like a storm that becomes stronger the moment you resist it. And somewhere in the quiet, a question begins to form. Why can't I control my own mind? Why does it feel like my thoughts are controlling me? What if the problem is not that your mind is weak, but that you were never taught how it actually works? Centuries ago, Japanese samurai faced death almost every day. One moment of fear, one panicked thought, one hesitation, and everything was over. And yet, they walked into battle with a mind as still as a sleeping lake. Not because they forced their thoughts to stop, but because they understood something the modern world has forgotten. They called it Mushin, the mind without mind. A state where fear dissolves, hesitation disappears, and action flows without effort. Today, I want to tell you the story of a young samurai named Kaizen, a warrior whose greatest enemy was not in front of him, but inside his own head. And through his journey, you may discover a way to experience true mental silence, without fighting your thoughts at all. Before we begin, pause for a moment. What is the one thought that keeps returning to you no matter how hard you try to silence it? Write it in the comments, not as a confession of weakness, but as the first step toward freedom. And if you want to learn the ancient mental systems used by samurai, monks, and warriors to build an unshakable mind, consider subscribing. This channel is not about motivation, it's about mastery. Now, let us begin the path toward silence. Kaizen was only 22 years old, yet the elders of the dojo already spoke his name with quiet expectation. They said his stance was strong, his movements precise, his discipline rare for someone so young. When he held a wooden sword, his posture was calm, his shoulders steady, his eyes focused forward. From the outside, he looked like a warrior already walking the path of mastery. But inside, Kaizen was fighting a battle no one could see. Every time he stepped onto the training ground, his mind betrayed him. While other students moved with fluid confidence, Kaizen's thoughts raced ahead of his body, pulling him into a storm of doubt. What if I miss? What if I'm too slow? What if the master sees my hesitation? What if I'm not meant for this life? Each question arrived faster than the last, stacking upon his chest like invisible weight. And in that weight, hesitation was born. His hands tightened at the wrong moment. His breath broke when it needed to flow. His blade paused for half a second too long. And in that pause, his opponent's strike always found its mark. Not because Kaizen lacked skill, but because his mind was louder than his movement. After every defeat, he bowed respectfully, just like the others. But while they rose and laughed, shaking off bruises as lessons, Kaizen carried his failure with him like a shadow. He trained longer, he practiced harder, he corrected his form again and again. Yet the more he tried to fix himself, the more the noise inside him grew. One evening, after the dojo had emptied and the lanterns dimmed, Kaizen sat alone beneath an old cedar tree at the edge of the courtyard. The air was still, the mountains stood silent, even the wind seemed to rest. But his mind refused to follow. His fingers trembled slightly as they rested on his knees. His breath came shallow and uneven. His chest felt tight, as if something unseen were pressing down from the inside. He closed his eyes, hoping for calm, but instead the thoughts rushed in stronger than before. Every mistake replayed, every doubt sharpened itself. Why won't my mind stop? He whispered into the darkness. He pressed his palms together, trying to force stillness the way muscles are forced into strength. But the harder he pushed, the louder his thoughts became, like striking a drum and expecting silence. Kaizen felt trapped, not by his body, not by his training, but by his own inner voice. He hated that fear followed him into a place meant for courage. He hated that weakness appeared where warriors were forged. And more than anything, he hated feeling alone inside his own head. Kaizen did not yet understand that his struggle was not unique, that every warrior who had ever walked the path had faced this same invisible enemy. He did not know that the mind, when untrained, turns against itself. That doubt, when unchecked, becomes a blade sharper than any sword. As the stars spread across the sky above him, Kaizen lowered his head, believing something was broken inside him, believing that true warriors were born calm, and that he had somehow failed to become one. What he could not see was that someone else was watching. A presence stood quietly at the edge of the courtyard, unmoving, observing, listening not to Kaizen's words, but to the silence beneath them. A man who had once fought the same storm. A man who understood that the loudest battles are never fought with steel. And in that moment, without Kaizen knowing it, the path toward Mushin had already begun. Kaizen felt the presence before he heard a single footstep. The air shifted, almost imperceptibly, as if the night itself had leaned closer. The stillness around the courtyard deepened, not breaking, but settling, like water becoming calm after a ripple fades. Kaizen opened his eyes slowly and turned his head. An old man stood a short distance away. He wore simple gray robes, unadorned, untouched by dust or time. His hands rested behind his back, his posture relaxed, yet unshakably grounded. His eyes were open, calm, clear, not fixed on Kaizen, but aware of everything at once, like a lake that reflects the sky without effort. This was Master Ryoshin. The students whispered about him, though few had ever trained under him. Some said he once defeated 10 bandits alone. Others said he could sit through an entire storm without moving. But most believed the same thing, that Master Ryoshin had achieved Mushin, the mind without mind. And yet, he was rarely seen. He taught no formal classes. He gave no speeches. He corrected no stances. He simply observed. Ryoshin lowered himself onto the stone beside Kaizen without a sound, as if gravity itself had learned to move more gently around him. For a long moment, he said nothing. Kaizen kept his eyes on the ground, a quiet shame tightening in his chest. To be seen like this, broken, restless, trembling, felt heavier than any defeat in training. The silence stretched. But it was not uncomfortable. It was intentional. It pressed nothing, demanded nothing. It simply existed, and in that existence, Kaizen felt something unfamiliar. Space. Space without judgment. Space without urgency. The noise in his mind did not vanish, but it softened, just enough for him to breathe. Finally, Master Ryoshin exhaled slowly. "You are not losing because your sword is weak," he said, his voice low and steady. "You are losing because your mind is loud." Kaizen's chest tightened. He had never spoken those words aloud. Yet this man had seen through him without a single question. Without turning his head, Ryoshin reached down and picked up a fallen leaf from the ground. He rolled it gently between his fingers, watching it as one might watch a thought pass through the mind. "How do I silence it?" Kaizen asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've tried everything." Ryoshin released the leaf. It drifted downward, slow and effortless, until it touched the earth without sound. "You are trying to fight your thoughts," the master said. "Fighting the mind is like throwing stones into a pond and expecting the water to become still." Kaizen watched the leaf settle, something inside him stirring. "Your thoughts are not enemies," Ryoshin continued. "They are clouds passing through the sky. They appear, they drift, they disappear." He turned slightly, finally meeting Kaizen's eyes. "You are not the clouds. You are the sky." For the first time in years, Kaizen felt a knot loosen inside his chest. Not completely, not magically, but enough to feel the difference between tension and release. "But when I try to calm myself," Kaizen said, "the thoughts only grow louder." Ryoshin nodded, as if he had expected nothing else. "Of course they do," he replied, "because you are trying to command the mind instead of understanding it." He tapped 2 fingers gently against Kaizen's chest. Quietness is not created through force. It is cultivated through discipline, through repetition, through Mushin. The word echoed inside Kaizen like a bell struck softly. "The mind without mind," Ryoshin said, gazing toward the dark outline of the mountains. "The mind that does not cling. The mind that does not fear. The mind that moves as effortlessly as the body." Ryoshin rose slowly, turning toward the bamboo forest. "Tomorrow at dawn," he said without looking back, "meet me at the eastern clearing." He paused, just long enough for his next words to sink in. "This training will not be easy. You are not fighting the world, Kaizen. He glanced over his shoulder. His eyes calm, unwavering. You are fighting the man you have been your entire life. Then he walked away, his footsteps dissolving into the night as quietly as they had arrived. Kaizen remained beneath the cedar tree, staring at the ground. The noise in his mind was still there. The doubts had not vanished. The fears had not surrendered. But for the first time, the silence did not feel empty. It felt like an invitation. The eastern clearing lay hidden beneath a thin veil of morning mist. Kaizen arrived before the sun had risen above the mountains. The air cold enough to sting his lungs with each breath. Dew clung to the bamboo leaves like countless silent witnesses. And the ground beneath his feet felt firm, unyielding, honest. He bowed toward the clearing, heart steady but expectant. Master Ryoshin was already there. He knelt upon a flat stone at the center of the clearing. Eyes closed, spine straight, breathing so softly that it seemed the forest itself was breathing through him. He looked less like a man waiting to teach and more like a part of the landscape that had always been there. Kaizen bowed deeply. I am ready, Master. Ryoshin opened his eyes slowly, as if returning from a place beyond thought. He studied Kaizen for a long moment, not critically, not approvingly, simply seeing him. No, the Master said gently. You are not ready, but you have arrived, and that is enough. He gestured for Kaizen to sit. The young samurai lowered himself onto the cold earth, his body alert, his mind searching. He expected instructions, a breathing method, a meditation posture, some sacred technique to control the chaos inside him. Instead, Ryoshin spoke only 2 words. Hold your sword. Kaizen obeyed. He wrapped his fingers around the wooden hilt, feeling its familiar weight settle into his palms. Raise it. Kaizen lifted the sword above his head. Lower it. He lowered the blade. Again. And again. And again. The movement was simple, almost insulting in its simplicity. Raise, lower, raise, lower. The same breath, the same stance, the same rhythm. Minutes passed, then more minutes. The mist thinned, the sky brightened, the forest awakened. Kaizen's shoulders began to ache. His wrists tightened, sweat formed along his brow. Still, the Master said nothing. He did not correct Kaizen's posture. He did not praise his discipline. He did not explain the purpose of the exercise. The silence pressed inward. An hour passed. Kaizen's body could endure it. His training had prepared him for pain. But his mind began to rebel. Thoughts crept in, subtle at first, then sharper. This is pointless. Why am I doing this? This isn't real training. I should be learning techniques, not wasting time. His breath grew uneven. His grip tightened. The movement lost its calm rhythm. Frustration began to coil inside his chest, turning restlessness into irritation, irritation into anger. Master, Kaizen finally said, lowering the sword too quickly, the tip striking the ground with a dull sound. What does this have to do with Mushin? Ryoshin did not answer immediately. He rose and walked slowly behind Kaizen, his footsteps soundless against the earth. There, the Master said softly. Do you hear it? Kaizen frowned. Hear what? That voice, Ryoshin replied. The one screaming inside you. Kaizen froze. That, the Master continued, is your true opponent. Ryoshin stepped in front of him, his gaze calm, unwavering. Your mind is addicted to noise. It feeds on movement, on complexity, on struggle. When I gave it simplicity, it panicked. Kaizen swallowed, his throat dry. This, Ryoshin said, placing a hand gently on Kaizen's shoulder, is the first breaking of the ego. Kaizen looked up, confused. The moment you realize, the Master continued, that you do not control your mind controls you. He tapped 2 fingers lightly against Kaizen's temple. Mushin is not about emptying the mind, Ryoshin said. It is about seeing the noise clearly and choosing not to obey it. Kaizen lifted the sword again. This time, something was different. The thoughts were still there. The complaints, the impatience, the doubts. But instead of fighting them, Kaizen noticed them. He felt them rise, surge, and demand attention. And for the first time, he did not respond. Raise. Lower. The movement became less about the sword and more about endurance, not of muscle, but of awareness. His arms burned. His breath shook. His mind shouted. And yet, beneath the shouting, Kaizen felt something new. A faint ripple of quiet. It was small, fragile, almost unnoticeable, but it was real. As the sun finally crested the mountains, spilling golden light across the clearing, Kaizen continued lifting the sword. Not because the master demanded it, but because he had glimpsed something beneath the chaos. The storm inside him had not ended. But for the first time in his life, he was no longer running from it. The days that followed were harder than anything Kaizen had ever endured in combat. Not because the training demanded more strength, but because it stripped away every distraction his mind had relied on for years. Each morning before dawn, he returned to the eastern clearing. Each morning, Master Ryoshin was already there. And each morning, the instruction was the same. Lift the sword, lower the sword, repeat. At first, Kaizen measured time by pain. His shoulders burned, his forearms tightened until his fingers felt numb. Sweat soaked into the earth beneath his feet. But soon, the body faded into the background, and the true battlefield revealed itself. The war did not rage in his muscles. It erupted in his thoughts. Boredom arrived first, quiet but persistent. This is too slow. Nothing is happening. I should be improving by now. When boredom failed to provoke a response, frustration took its place. Kaizen felt it tighten in his chest, sharp and impatient, whispering that this training was beneath him, that he was wasting precious time while others advanced. His breath shortened, his movements lost their smoothness. The sword no longer rose and fell like a calm tide, but like a weapon dragged against resistance. Then came anger. Anger at the silence. Anger at the master's refusal to explain. Anger at himself for not understanding what everyone else seemed to grasp so easily. With each repetition, the voice inside him grew louder, harsher, more convincing. It told him he was failing. It told him he was weak. It told him to stop. Master Ryoshin watched quietly from a distance, as if listening not to Kaizen's movements, but to the invisible noise that surrounded them. He did not intervene. He did not correct. He waited. One afternoon, after hours of repetition beneath a merciless sun, something inside Kaizen finally snapped. His arms trembled as he slammed the wooden blade into the ground. Dust rising sharply around his feet. This is not training, Kaizen shouted, his voice breaking the stillness of the clearing. This is torture. Ryoshin turned slowly, his expression unchanged. Good, the master said softly. Now your real training can begin. Kaizen stared at him, breath ragged, heart pounding with disbelief. How can this help me? He demanded. How does lifting a sword 1,000 times quiet the mind? Ryoshin stepped closer, his hands folded behind his back. The mind reveals itself under repetition. He said, in chaos, everyone believes they are strong. But in stillness, all illusions die. He gestured toward Kaizen's chest. You believe your thoughts are truth. But they are only echoes, old fears repeating themselves. The ego survives by creating noise. If it cannot distract you, it will attack you. If it cannot attack, it will whisper doubt. And if doubt fails, it will seduce you with impatience. Kaizen felt the words strike deeper than any blow. This sword, Ryoshin continued, tapping the wooden blade gently, is not training your body. It is training your attention. Kaizen's breath slowed, just slightly. When you lift the sword, your thoughts scream, the master said. When you lower it, they scream louder. But when you continue despite the noise, something begins to happen. He leaned closer, his voice almost a whisper. The noise starts to weaken. Kaizen swallowed. And if it doesn't? Ryoshin straightened and looked toward the bamboo grove. Then you continue, he said simply, until the mind learns that you are no longer its servant. Kaizen picked up the sword again. This time, he did not fight the thoughts. He did not argue with them. He did not try to silence them. He watched them rise like waves, crash against his awareness, and retreat. The shouting remained, but it no longer felt personal. It felt mechanical, predictable. Raise. Lower. For a brief moment, so brief he almost missed it, the space between two thoughts widened. In that space, Kaizen felt a single clean breath pass through him, untouched by fear or judgment. It was not peace. It was not calm. But it was enough to show him that the war within the mind could be witnessed, and one day, Perhaps, endured without resistance. And in that realization, Kaizen understood something essential. The greatest battle of his life would not be won by defeating his thoughts, but by outlasting their demand to be obeyed. The training did not change suddenly. There was no dramatic moment, no revelation that split the world in two. The sword still rose and fell. The mornings were still cold. The clearing was still silent. And Kaizen's thoughts still appeared, just as loud, just as familiar. But something inside him had shifted. Master Ryoshin led Kaizen away from the clearing and into a quiet corner of the forest. A place where the bamboo grew taller and closer together, their leaves brushing softly against one another like whispered conversations. Even the light moved differently here, filtered and gentle, as if the world itself were reluctant to disturb the stillness. This, Ryoshin said as he lowered himself onto the ground, is where we begin the second pillar. Kaizen sat across from him, his posture upright, his body alert, his mind uncertain. He waited for instruction, for technique, for something to do. Instead, the master closed his eyes. "Close yours," Ryoshin said quietly. Kaizen obeyed. "Breathe in," the master continued, his voice barely louder than the wind moving through bamboo. Not through effort, through invitation, as if the horizon itself were entering you. Kaizen inhaled slowly. The air was cool, clean, carrying the faint scent of moss and earth. His chest expanded without force. "Now exhale," Ryoshin said. "Do not push the breath out. Let it fall." Kaizen released the breath. His shoulders softened, his jaw unclenched. A tension he had not noticed slipped away, leaving behind a gentle emptiness. "This breath," the master said, "is called koku, the breath that does not break." They sat like this for hours. No counting, no controlling, no correcting. At first, Kaizen's mind resisted fiercely. It searched for progress, for signs of success, for something to measure. Thoughts rose quickly, impatient and demanding. "Am I doing this right? Is this working? How long has it been?" Each thought tried to pull him back into effort. But Ryoshin did not intervene. And so Kaizen remained. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the rhythm of his breath began to smooth itself out. It no longer felt like something he was doing. It felt like something happening. The breath came and went on its own, quiet and unbroken, like a river that flows without asking permission. His thoughts still appeared. Memories, doubts, plans. But they no longer startled him. They landed, lingered, and drifted away, like birds touching a branch before taking flight again. Kaizen noticed them without reaching, without pushing, without following. And in the space they left behind, he felt something new. Space. A space between one thought and the next. A space between sensation and reaction. A space where nothing needed to be fixed or controlled. In that space, Kaizen felt his awareness widen. Not outward, but inward, like a door opening quietly inside his chest. One evening, as the forest glowed gold beneath the setting sun, Ryoshin finally spoke. "You are beginning to understand," he said. Kaizen opened his eyes slowly. "I'm not forcing anything," he said, "but things are changing." Ryoshin nodded. "That is because stillness does not arrive through control," he replied. "It arrives through surrender." Kaizen considered the word, surrender? To breathe without command, the master said. To think without clinging, to feel without drowning. Kaizen's gaze drifted toward the bamboo. A breeze moved through the grove, bending the stalks gently. They did not resist the wind. They did not collapse beneath it. They simply moved together, effortlessly, without fear. "When you move as they move," Ryoshin said, following Kaizen's gaze, "without hesitation and without thought, you will know Mushin." Kaizen closed his eyes once more. The breath flowed. The thoughts softened. And for the first time, inner stillness did not feel like emptiness. It felt like freedom. The day arrived without ceremony. There were no signs in the sky, no feeling of anticipation in the air. The dojo looked the same as it always had. Dust lay undisturbed on the training ground. The bamboo stood quietly along the edges, unmoved by even the lightest breeze. Yet something beneath the surface had shifted. Kaizen stepped into the training circle with his wooden sword resting lightly in his hands. His grip was relaxed. His shoulders were loose. His breath flowed without instruction, Without effort. He did not feel confident. He did not feel afraid. He felt present. His opponent was Dai, one of the strongest warriors in the dojo. Broad-shouldered, fast, precise, the kind of fighter whose strikes carried certainty. In the past, Kaizen's mind would have tightened the moment he saw him. Thoughts would have rushed forward, warning him, calculating, predicting failure before the first movement even began. But today, the mind remained quiet. Not empty. Just distant. Master Ryoshin stood at the edge of the circle. Hands folded, eyes calm. He did not offer guidance. He did not nod. He simply watched, as if observing the flow of water rather than the clash of steel. Begin, the instructor said. Dai moved first. A sharp downward strike cut through the air, fast enough to shake hesitation into any fighter's bones. Kaizen's mind attempted to rise, to shout instructions, to interfere, block, step back, think, but before the thought could fully form, something else happened. It let go. Not with force. Not with effort. It simply stopped insisting. Kaizen moved. There was no decision, no inner voice, no sense of choosing the correct response. His body shifted as naturally as breath leaving the lungs. His feet angled away. His sword met Dai's blade in a clean arc. Not from calculation, but alignment. Dai struck again. Kaizen flowed. Step, turn, counter. Each movement followed the last without pause, without tension, without commentary. Time did not slow. It did not speed up. It seemed to lose its meaning altogether. There was only motion responding to motion. Awareness touching awareness. The noise that had ruled Kaizen's life was gone. Not pushed away. Not silenced by force. Simply absent. For a brief, fragile moment, there was no Kaizen, no opponent, no outcome to chase. There was only presence moving through a body that no longer resisted it. Action without actor, movement without mover. When Dai finally stepped back, breath heavy, the match ended. The circle fell silent. Kaizen lowered his sword. His hands did not shake. His chest was calm. He did not feel victorious. He did not feel proud. He felt quiet, a deep, warm quiet that did not demand explanation. It felt like waking from a long dream. Master Ryoshin approached him slowly. That, he said gently, was Mushin. Kaizen swallowed. I didn't think, he said softly. I didn't even try to win. Ryoshin nodded. You did not respond to your opponent. He replied. You responded to the moment. Kaizen looked down at the ground beneath his feet. Then at the dust clinging to his sandals. Everything appeared ordinary, and yet nothing felt the same. The master placed a hand on Kaizen's shoulder. Do not cling to this, he said. Mushin is not something you possess. It is something that visits. Kaizen listened quietly. When it arrives, Ryoshin continued, welcome it. When it leaves, do not chase it. The moment you grasp for it, the mind returns. Kaizen nodded, not fully understanding, but knowing the truth in the words. The noise might return tomorrow. The doubts might rise again. The thoughts might once more demand attention. But now, Kaizen knew something he had never known before. The mind could let go. And when it did, life moved effortlessly. The training did not end with that moment of silence. In the days that followed, Kaizen noticed something subtle but important. The noise did not disappear forever. Thoughts still returned, doubts still whispered. Some mornings, the mind was calm. Other mornings, it was restless again. And for the first time, this did not frighten him. Master Ryoshin called Kaizen to the clearing one quiet afternoon, when the sun hung low and the shadows of the bamboo stretched long across the ground. The master knelt and drew 4 simple lines in the earth with the tip of his staff. Each line was straight, deliberate, unadorned. These, Ryoshin said, are the pillars that hold a quiet mind. Kaizen leaned forward, listening with a stillness that came not from effort, but attention. Without these, the master continued, Mushin collapses. With them, even chaos cannot rule you. Ryoshin touched the first line. The first pillar is observation without resistance. He said, most people try to fight their thoughts. They argue with them, suppress them, chase them away, but resistance feeds the noise. Thoughts are like fire. Touch them, and they burn hotter. Kaizen felt the truth of it settle in his chest. He remembered every night spent wrestling his own mind. When you observe, Ryoshin continued, you remove the fuel, thoughts rise, then fall, because nothing is holding them in place. This is where freedom begins. The master moved his staff to the second line. The second pillar is breath without force. He said, your breath is the bridge between body and mind. When the breath is broken, the mind fractures. When the breath flows, the mind follows. He placed Kaizen's hand gently against his chest. The rhythm beneath was smooth, unhurried, alive. Do not command the breath, Ryoshin said. Invite it. Awareness follows breath. Stillness follows awareness. Kaizen nodded slowly. Ryoshin touched the third line, his voice softening. The third pillar is return without judgment. He said, your mind will wander. It will fall into old habits. This is not failure. Kaizen felt a tightness ease inside him. Mushin is not the absence of falling. The master continued, it is the art of returning. Again and again, without anger, without punishment. Forgive the mind, and it will learn to forgive itself. The staff moved to the fourth line. The final pillar, Ryoshin said, is action without thought. Kaizen looked up. This is what most people misunderstand. The master continued, Mushin is not emptiness. It is clarity. It is awareness moving faster than fear. It is intuition unhindered by hesitation. Ryoshin traced a slow circle around all four lines. When these pillars unite, he said, thoughts do not disappear. They simply lose their authority. Kaizen felt a deep warmth spread through his chest. Not excitement, not pride, something steadier, something rooted. This system, Ryoshin said, rising slowly to his feet, does not remove thought, it removes the suffering wrapped around thought. He looked toward the distant mountains, their peaks fading into the sky. Stillness means nothing if it exists only here. The master continued, you must carry these pillars into the world, into conflict, into failure, into everyday life. Kaizen stood beside him, the four lines etched not just into the earth, but into his awareness. He understood now that Mushin was not a destination to reach, but a balance to maintain. The next stage of his journey would not be fought in the clearing, or the forest, or the dojo. It would be lived. Years passed, quietly. The forest changed with the seasons, leaves falling, snow melting, spring returning again and again. And with each passing year, Kaizen changed as well, not outwardly, but inwardly. His movements grew simpler, his presence grew steadier. The noise that once ruled him no longer defined his days. He no longer trained to become stronger. He no longer trained to become faster. He trained only to maintain the delicate bridge between breath, awareness, and the present moment. Young warriors began to seek him out. They came with the same restless eyes Kaizen once had, hands that trembled without knowing why, minds crowded with fear, ambition, regret, and doubt. Some were proud, some were broken, some were angry at the world, but all of them carried the same invisible weight, a mind that never knew how to rest. Kaizen did not lecture them. He asked them to lift the sword slowly, to lower it gently, to breathe without forcing, to sit with their storms instead of running from them. He never promised peace in a week. He never promised mastery in a month. He promised only a path, one breath, one return, one moment of presence at a time. One evening, as the river reflected the fading gold of the sun, a young student sat beside him and asked, Sensei, how did you silence your mind forever? Kaizen smiled, a small, quiet smile shaped by years of understanding. I never silenced anything, he said. He picked up a pebble and tossed it into the river. Ripples spread across the surface, then faded. Thoughts are like this, Kaizen continued. They appear, they move, they disappear. The river does not fear the ripple, and neither should you. The student listened, but Kaizen knew the truth. Some lessons are not learned through words. They are lived. He stood slowly and looked toward the distant hills, remembering a young man sitting beneath a cedar tree, convinced something inside him was broken. That memory no longer carried pain. It no longer felt like weakness. It felt like a beginning. One day, Kaizen said softly, you will understand Mushin not as a technique, but as a way of being. It will arrive quietly, like a visitor who does not knock. And when it comes, you will not celebrate. He paused. You will simply breathe and know. The wind moved gently through the trees, and the river flowed on, undisturbed by its own ripples. And now, the story turns toward you. For the next 14 days, practice this path. For the first 3 days, sit for 1 minute and simply observe your thoughts. Do not fight them, do not judge them, let them rise, and let them fall. From day 4 to 7, add gentle breathing, 4 seconds in, 6 seconds out. Let the breath become the anchor you return to. From day 8 to 14, practice returning. Each time the mind wanders, come back softly, not with frustration, but with kindness. You will not become a master in 14 days. But you will feel the first opening of quiet inside you. A small doorway into Mushin. If you are ready to begin, write in the comments. I start my 14 days today. Make your commitment real. And if this journey resonated with you, if you want more stories, systems, and ancient wisdom from samurai, monks, and warriors who mastered the mind, subscribe to the channel. Not for motivation, not for inspiration, but for mastery. Until next time, be present, breathe deeply, and walk the path of no mind.